Looks good on my end. Okay, cool. So let me put the chat on one screen here. Let me see everyone a bit bigger on my end here. Okay, cool. So welcome everyone. Thank you for spending an hour of your evening on a Monday night in the middle of March. I know we're all probably quite webinared out at this point. And when Tara and Shauna asked me to help out with another webinar, specifically speaking about the latest support grants that are out there through the province or federal government, I obviously said yes. One thing I've been doing over the last 2 years is becoming somewhat of an expert in this field, which is essentially trying to help our businesses in the community stay afloat during this difficult time. So, it's been an interesting last 2 years. I remember speaking about this topic 2 years ago for the first time, and listening to Trudeau every single morning at about 11 a.m. I think he was speaking in the news, and just trying to figure out what's happening next and trying to keep my finger to the pulse. It was not only stressful in my time, but I couldn't imagine the stress that my clients and you guys were feeling day to day, trying to figure out what the hell is happening next. So, kudos to you for trucking along the last 2 years and trying to keep fighting through. My part's the easy part at the end of the day, right? I'm just supporting you guys and supporting our businesses doing what they do best. And so when Tara and Shauna asked me to help out, I obviously jumped on the opportunity, because if there's anything I can do at the end of the day to help out our businesses in the area or across Canada, I'm always happy to do that. It's small businesses is the blood of our is of our economy at the end of the day, right? So so let's just jump into it. A quick introduction for people who don't know who I am. So my name is Andrew Seguin. I'm the founder of Seguin Financial. I opened up 4 years ago. So I have a physical office building in Cornwall, Ontario. It's on the corner of 13th and Notre Dame. It's you guys might have driven by it. It kind of looks like a big house, like a big blue house is what people refer to as. It was a hair salon before. I bought it 2 months before COVID. Thankfully, I was able to get most of the renovations done beforehand. I couldn't imagine trying to do a renovation the way I was doing it in March and April. But we have a physical presence. But one thing I'm very proud of saying is that we are one of the first. Actually, I would say we are the first fully paperless and cloud-based bookkeeping and tax/accounting firm in SDNG in Cornwall, Akwesasne. So I'm very proud of that. If you ever physically came to our offices, you hardly see any paper. Outside of tax season where paper is shuffling around, it's not ours, it's our clients. But very proud of that. So that's who I am. That's my firm. It's me and a team of 5 others. So we're a team of 6 now, and I don't know how far I'm at the kind of growth that we're going to be hitting, but there's going to be a certain point where I don't want to keep growing, because there's always growing pains and managerial pains as you go through the process. But I love it. My team is great. Okay. Enough about me, enough about a firm. Let's talk about what you're here for, which is essentially everything related to the COVID subsidy and any updates. So we're going to go through the CBEC, which is the Canada Emergency Business Account, the updates that were announced a few months ago. We're also going to talk about the Ontario COVID-19 Worker Income Protection Benefit. As you're noticing, these acronyms are getting out of hand. It's getting kind of crazy. I've definitely lost track at this point for sure. I had my initial few that was like, having dreams about at night, CBA, SU, CERS, and CECRA, but now it's gotten to be kind of crazy. So then we have the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, which is the CRHP. And then we have the Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Program, which is the THRP. We also have the Hardest Hit Business Recovery Program, which is the HHBRP, becoming a joke, right? Like the local lockdown period, which is the LLP. Now, whether I think some of these I'm creating myself, like I don't know if the Worker Income Protection Benefit actually has an acronym, but I might as well just keep it with might as well be consistent, right? As an FYI too, if how I like to do my webinars and workshops is definitely an open environment. So if you have a question about a specific slide that I'm on, you don't have to wait until the end. Just like stop me, type it in chat. You can raise your hand, just unmute yourself and just go ahead, whatever is best for you. I sort of like to have like, it's almost like we were being in person. So trying to kind of have that atmosphere, that sort of idea. A quick legal disclaimer is that every business is very unique and has its own characteristics. So it's a high-level overview of the latest subsidies, and I am talking about these subsidies in a general sense. If you have any specific unique questions, if there's time, you can definitely ask it. I'll try to help as best I can. If not, you can email me, as Shauna put into the chat, and I'd be happy to help out as much as I can, free of charge too. So to a certain degree, obviously, like I wouldn't do the applications for you, but if you have like a 10-minute, a few questions about 10 minutes long, I won't charge you for that. So feel free to email me or call me. And I do recommend to review the CRA's website for assistance because the numbers do change. It's very fluid. Sometimes they're making errors on their spreadsheet. Sometimes things are updating as we're going on. So just keep an eye on things. And obviously, if you have a tax accountant or a bookkeeper, please consult with them for specifics. If you don't have one, it's okay. Don't stress about it. You're going to be essentially more than likely on your own when it comes to reviewing and submitting your own numbers, which is fine, right? It's like there's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay, so the CBEC. So there were some updates. So specifically on there was a mention, I believe it was either early January, I think I was on vacation maybe in Christmas holidays when they announced this, but it's been extended another year. So initially it was supposed to be December 31, 2022, when you were supposed to pay off your CBEC loan if you wanted the forgiveness, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't pay it off on this date, the loan is still available. You don't have to pay it, but the forgiveness component is gone. So if you took out 40 and you didn't pay anything back, in this case, by December 31, 2023, you're going to owe 40. You will owe 40, but if you've taken out 40 and you pay back 30, well, then that's all you have to pay. So this extension provides an additional 12 months of interest-free relief, which is 21 and a half months from now. Okay, so to either receive the full 10,000 or 20,000 forgiveness, and the difference between the two is if you got the expanded CBEC, so there was an initial application of 40, and then there was an expanded application for an additional 20. So you got if you got the first 40 and that's it, you have $10,000 of forgiveness available. If you receive the full 60, you have $20,000 forgiveness available. If you have not begun putting funds away for the CBEC, and the reason I bring this up because a lot of businesses have not, and that's okay. Like I can understand that the fluidity and the roller coaster ride over the last 2 years has made it quite difficult, if not impossible, to put money away. But just so you have some perspective what this looks like, okay? If you receive the full 40, you need to put away about $1,400 a month starting today to pay off the full 30 by December 31, 2023. Okay, so you need to put away about $1,400 a month that you cannot touch. Now, you can either directly start paying it or you can put into like a low interest savings account. That's really up to you, but this amount has to be paid, aka the 30, by December 31, 2023, if you want the forgiveness to be waived. If not, it becomes like a normal interest-bearing loan at like 5% or something. So you've received the full 60, you need to put away about $1,860 or $1,860 a month as of today to receive the full forgiveness. And that's for 21 and a half months straight. You can't skip a beat. If you miss a month, you have to double up or spread that additional payment over the course of next 18 months, 17 months, depending on where you're at. So be aware of this number because it's going to creep up on you again. It was creeping up on my clients, I would say in October and November, because that sort of 1 year timeline was coming up. but thankfully there's an additional year came in effect. So those numbers are going to be very important for you as you move forward, I would say, as much as possible, right? It's easier said than done, but that's a number you have to be aware of. Any questions on the CBEC? That's pretty much it. Like they essentially now you get a whole year of additional interest relief. That's it. Now I know the CFIB, I know they're working on a few things. I know they're working on some additional forgiveness or they're also working on an additional round of CBEC. Unsure how that's playing out. I have no idea. It's a lot of politics, red tape, policies, and just a lot of moving parts. But if that's something that interests you, I would say reach out to, Kent McDougall, for instance, at the CFIB is very local, hands-on deck, sort of like finger to the pulse. And I have a direct channel with him in the CFIB, and I'm often talking to him and he's talking to me and such. But if you want to have your voice on a bigger, larger scale outside of the community, I'd say reach out to Kent McDougall at the CFIB. They're pretty hands-on when it comes to policy changes, right? Like one voice is not enough, but putting, hundreds of thousands of voices on the same topic into one stream, it's obviously quite different. So, okay, next one. So the Ontario COVID-19 Worker Income Protection Benefit. So this has been active since April 29, 2021, and it's going to be available for the next, say, 4.5 months. So the Employment Standards Act, so the ESA, which is what you have to follow once you have employees in your business, it was amended to legally require employers to provide employees with up to 3 days of paid infectious disease emergency leave due to reasons related to COVID-19. Essentially, it's sort of like 3 sick days of paid, but it's not general sick days. So if you remember during the Wynne government, there was a 1.3 days of personal leave that they've implemented. And when I say Wynne, I mean Kathleen Wynne in Ontario. And when Mr. Ford came into power, he got rid of that. So there was 3 days of personal leave before you can get paid to take whatever time off, essentially because you weren't feeling good, your dependents weren't feeling good, or whatever. That's been wiped out. Now this was re-implemented back in about 8 months ago, specifically related to COVID-19. Okay, I'm going to go give you some reasons in a sec, but there is a 120-day timeline or deadline to apply whenever you have paid this employee due to COVID-19 related reasons. Okay, so essentially, if someone is getting a sick day paid on March 14th, you have 120 days from now to make this application, or by November 22nd, 2022, whichever is earliest, which means that if someone got sick because of COVID in October 31st, you don't have 120 days anymore, you have 22 days. So your window is a lot shorter. So you don't get to do any applications outside or after November 22, 2022. Okay. So some examples of reasons related to COVID-19, it's quite broad, but going for a COVID-19 test is one. Staying home while waiting for results of COVID-19. Getting sick because of COVID-19. Getting treatment for mental health reasons. So it's not only just physical illness, but mental illness as well. Going to get vaccinated. So if that's taking you a few hours. Getting I got a spelling error there, but a side effect due to the vaccination. And haven't been advised to self-isolate due to COVID-19 by an employer, medical practitioner, or other specified authority. We're also providing care or support to certain relatives for COVID-19 related reasons. So it's pretty broad, okay? So how does this work? So you're eligible for reimbursement of this emergency leave if any of the following apply. So this gets a little complicated, but I'll try to simplify it as best I can. If the employee has paid leave as part of their employment contract and they use that paid leave, they would apply. Like this, you would be eligible. Or if the employment contract provided less pay than the Employment Standards Act entitlement, then you're also eligible to apply for this. And or this one I really don't care about it if it's more restrictive than the ESA. So what it essentially is, for like 90% of businesses, you'll be eligible for this. Okay, so like if you're a small business and you paid an employee because they took 4 hours off for sick or 3 full days off for sick, you would be eligible for this subsidy. I'm going to have another slide here talking about how much this would look like. Now, this program is actually ran through the WSIB, or the Worker Safety Insurance Board, which is quite interesting. I think it's because the provincial government didn't have the infrastructure to handle this. You know, if you remember like 2 years ago, whenever the CERB came into effect, and then Service Canada was like, oh God, we don't have the capacity at all to handle this. Go to the CRA, and the CRA is like, all right, we'll figure something out. It's sort of like that. So I don't think the Ontario government had any capability of doing this. A lot of this stuff, these grants and subsidies are just sort of like sticking to the wall and hopefully it doesn't break. That's what it's like. The WSIB had the capabilities of sort of handling these applications. So I think they worked in tangent with the provincial government to build it. But it's through the WSIB, but you actually don't need to be registered for WSIB. So some businesses are actually considered exempt for WSIB purposes, like hair salons and like, there's just a bunch of businesses that are considered exempt. You could still go through this application or the subsidy, even if you don't have WSIB. Okay, so the amounts, okay, so essentially is this, the rule is this: you are generally required to pay employees the wages they would have earned had they not taken the leave, up to $200 a day for up to 3 days. So as an example, if someone makes $17 an hour and they would have worked a 10-hour shift, they would get paid their full $170, and you would get reimbursed for $170. That's how it works. So you're getting your full reimbursement based on the actual wages that you paid this person, up to 200. Another example though, is someone makes $30 an hour and they would have worked an 8-hour shift. You're only legally required to pay them the $200 for the sick pay, and you would get reimbursed for the $200. So that's the difference here. So you legally now have to pay them up to $200 for 3 full days equivalent of COVID-19 related emergency leave. Okay, so before in April 2021, when the ESA stated at the time, someone gets sick, you don't have to pay them. They would go on, what CRB, CERB, illness protection, EI, whatever they were going through back then. Now you do have to pay them for 3 full days, up to $200 per day. So that's how it works. And there's an application process you would do. If you just type in this like worker income protection benefit application, it would bring you to the proper site. And there's a bunch of questions they ask, like the employee's name, how much they got paid, what's your business number, what days they got sick, why are you making a claim, and you need to enter your bank information so they can give you direct deposit. If you've done any type of subsidy or grant application in the last 2 years, it's all the same. It's pretty much that same type of questions they're going to ask you. All right, so that's any questions on that one. It's not complicated. If you want to simplify it, as you pretty much need to pay your employees up to $200 a day, 3 days, for any reason related to COVID-19. That's the best way to think about it. So you get to up to $200 per day. Now, you cannot segment that and split that up like 2 hours here, 4 hours, 3, 4, 4. It's like if someone takes 4 hours off, that's considered the 1 day. They taken off 10 hours, that's still 1 day. So it's up to 3 days over 3 claims. And you can make all the claims. We've done a good handful of these applications, these subsidy applications. You can do it like one at a time, or you can submit like 4 employees with 3 different days each, all in one go. So we usually wait, if possible, to do it once a month, because it is a bit involved. Like there's some work involved with it, but it's been no issue. We've had no issues. Once you do submit the application, it's gone through pretty quick. Okay, the CRHP, and this is the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. And this one's a bit older. So this one's also around June 2021, and it's active for up until July 2nd, 2022. The deadline to apply is 180 days after the claim period. So you have about 6 months from the end of the period that you're working in. So if you're working on a period that's September 30th, you have 6 months. So that puts you March 31st, give or take, plus or minus 2 days, depending on like 31 days in the month or 30 or whatever. So you have about 6 months to make a claim for this hiring program. So again, the example of period 22 as a claim period ending of November 20th, the due date is May 19th. So if you remember, there was a wage subsidy, which is called the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, or the CEWS or CUSE, or call whatever the hell you want. I don't care. During the periods when you're eligible for either the CEWS or the CRHP, you would have to pick the one that you benefited the most from you. Now, I just bring it up because you can still apply for 2 wage subsidy. I'm not talking about in this webinar because it's quite outdated. Nothing's changed with the CEWS, but there's still period 2021 or 21-22. I can't remember which ones we're at. One of them too. You essentially have 2 more periods of wage subsidies you can apply for. But when you're doing the wage subsidy application, when you go through the spreadsheet or the website, you have to pick the one that's more beneficial to you as a business. You don't actually have a choice. It's a matter of fact. They say the words, it's a fact whether you would apply for one or the other. So I'm just bringing that up as an FYI because you will still be doing the wage subsidy or the CRHP calculations from like 5 months ago still, if you're behind. So what is this program for? Because it's still going to be active for another 4 more months, and you can still apply from it for 5-6 months ago. So there's literally a 9-month window where this might be relevant for you. It's meant to provide a subsidy to employers who ramp up their hiring and employment practices as you're essentially recovering from the economic impact of COVID-19. Okay, so you're going to be comparing your wages to a specific period in time. This period of time is March 14th to April 10th. If you remember this, which seems like years ago, but it's really only been a year ago, which is insane, but we were pretty heavy in COVID at this point. We were at, I don't know, phase 2, step 2, second wave, whatever, second wave, I think it was called. It wasn't Delta. It wasn't Delta yet. Was it Delta? I have no idea. Like, I can't remember, but it was a bad time during this period, March 14th, April 10th. A lot of businesses were closed. So they're essentially saying, okay, if your business had little or no wages because your business was completely closed, and now you're ramping back up because you're either rehiring staff, you're hiring new staff, you're bringing people back, whatever, you could be and would be eligible for this subsidy program. Okay. So as you have more wages comparing to this period in time, and you're always using this period in time. So even today, even 4 months from now, you're going to be comparing to this period in time on period 14, March 14th to April 10th, 2021. As you have more wages compared to this period, your subsidy amount increases. So essentially, like I said in the first point here, it's to provide a subsidies who ramp up or increase their hiring practices compared to this point in time. Nearly all businesses are eligible. Okay, so like nonprofit, you're good. Sole prop, yes. Partnership, corporation, it's all good. Charity, no problem. It's like you're pretty much always going to be eligible. Anybody who's on this webinar or who's listening to us a month from now, whatever, you're going to be eligible. Okay, but you do need some specifics. So like the CEWS before, you do need to have a business number from the CRA before March 15, 2020. So I didn't put down a year there, but it's right before COVID, March 15th. It's a very special date in CRA's mind, but So you need to have a CRA number before March 15, 2020. You've also need to have employees who receive the T4 slip. That's pretty straightforward, right? Payroll is employees. So not a T5 slip. Dividends don't count. So it's T4 slip. And you only need to have a revenue decline of more than 10%. Now, at one point, the percentage was different. It was actually 0%, but I'm putting down 10% because that's pretty much where you're going to be at if you want to retroactively apply for the subsidy. It's a 10% revenue decline. So if you had a 4% decline, not eligible. Revenue, increase, not eligible. So you need a 10% revenue decline from either period 18 onwards, or even today, 10% decline in revenue. So right now we're talking about a 50%. They've extended it to a 50% subsidy rate until May 7th. So this means, as an example, because I want to give you an example, because it's like, what the hell am I looking at? Andrew, what are you talking about? An example, okay? If you had a 10% revenue decline in period 25, okay? Let's say you had $20,000 of wages with 5 employees from this baseline number, right? In period 14, March 14th to April 10th, you had $20,000 of wages, 5 employees. Now you have $40,000 of wages and 10 employees, either because you rehired people back, you brought new workers on, you expanded, whatever. It could be any reason, okay? But you've doubled your wages, doubled your staff. Well, you qualify, right? Because you have a 10% revenue decline. In this case, you had $20,000 of more wages. You would be eligible for a $10,000 subsidy. That's not bad, right? That ends up being about 25%. That's 25% of the wages you ended up paying out for that specific period. And all you need is a 10% revenue decline. A lot of people are forgetting about the subsidy. But the important thing is, if you kept all your staff on, which is awesome for you, and you were getting the wage subsidy, more than likely the wage subsidy is kicking in and it's gonna be stronger for you as opposed to this subsidy. But the wage subsidy is now essentially gone. So if you did bring on more staffing since that period in time, you probably can be eligible for this subsidy, and it could be a decent amount too, depending on your variables. That's very unique, right? It's like, this is a random example. You could be eligible if you brought 3 new employees on. If you were completely closed in this period and you rehired your 4 employees, well, you're good to go too, right? It's like, because your baseline is essentially $0 in wages. So you went from $0 in wages, say 20,000, you're also going to get a $10,000 wage subsidy, right? So it depends on the period you're talking about and what's going on in your business, but this one could be pretty helpful if you had employees and you sort of let them go or whatever else. So keep that in mind. All right, next one. So this is a newer one, okay? So now we're getting to the newer ones. This one's called the Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Program, or the TRHP. Essentially, it was enacted as soon as wage subsidies and rent subsidies ended on October 23rd. These got kicked on, okay? So day later, October 24th to May 7th, this program is active. So essentially, it's only 5 months ago. You can still apply for all these periods to get caught up if you haven't done that yet. Again, 180 days, you have 6 months. So this 180 days is going to be pretty normal for you, okay? So how do you be eligible? Okay, so if your business is in the tourism, hospitality, arts, entertainment, and or recreation sector, and you meet the following 3 conditions, you may qualify for the subsidy. Okay, so let's talk about specifics. This is, hold on, guys. More than 50% of your eligible revenue for the prior reference periods, okay? So periods 1 to 13, which is essentially like March 2020 up until, I don't know, June 2021, it came from at least one or more sources from the tourism, arts, recreation, etc. So at least half your revenue has to come from one of these industries. Okay, so that's criteria 1. Criteria 2, your 12-month average from March 2020 to February 21st is at least a 40% revenue drop. So again, when you're looking at this specific period, okay? So when you're looking at this specific period, you have to be at least 40% revenue drop compared to the 12-month average between March 2020 and February 21st. So if you only had a 20% revenue drop, you're gonna skip this. You're gonna skip this subsidy and move on to the next one essentially. So it's a pretty heavy revenue drop. 40% is not but this industry specifically has gotten beaten and destroyed and chewed up and spit out over the last 2 years, right? So you will probably have hit this 40% without even blinking, unfortunately. So, but it's half your revenue has to come from eligible revenue of these specific industries, and you have to have at least a 40% revenue drop from the average, the 12-month average between March 2020 and February 21st. Okay. To be defined in the tourism sector, it's a pretty long list. Okay, I can't describe everything, but I will give you some examples. There's a link here that I'm sure Tara or Sean would be happy to send out later on, like my slide deck, and you actually able to just click on that link. But you can just search it too. Like you can just type in Google TRHP sector examples. But I'll give you some common examples. So cinemas, hotels, short-term lodging, recreational facilities, restaurants, food services, travel agencies, trade shows, festivals, weddings, but golf courses, golf in general, courses, ranges, clubs are not eligible. So unfortunately, they took that completely out. You probably know if you're in the tourism sector in one way, shape, or form, but if you're unsure, you're going to have to go to that link because it's going to give you an example whether you do fall in this of like this industry related to the subsidy. Okay. So this subsidy is available on a sliding scale. So think back to wage subsidies and rent subsidies, how the higher the revenue decrease, the higher the subsidy. It's very similar to that. So this subsidy has a maximum of 75% of subsidy kickback, depending on your revenue loss. Okay, so it works very similar. The wage subsidy and the rent subsidy, if you've ever done any of those applications, this works very similar. Okay, so what I mean by very similar, it's the 4-week period, right? You're doing it's a 4-week time slot you're looking at. There's only a certain amount you can claim. There's an arm's length relationship requirement where you can't hire your family members after COVID hit and get them subsidized. You can't be paying rent to your holding corporation and claiming that as a rent subsidy. Like there's certain rules and requirements where you have to meet, but it's the same format. It's the same spreadsheet, the same like calculations involved, which is how many employees did you have? How much did you pay them per week? You know, there's certain weekly amounts you can only get subsidized for, but it's very similar. So the higher the revenue decrease you have, the more subsidies you get. And they're combined now. So this TRHP is both your wage subsidy and your rent subsidy within one package. It's a bit different, but you're going through one stream now instead of wage subsidy and a separate rent subsidy. But it's going to follow the exact same rules and format that you used to for the last 2.5 or 2 years. Okay. Some important notes though. There was a special election / like flexibility. So periods 24 and 25, which is December 19th to February 12th, access to this subsidy was expanded, okay, was expanded to include businesses that were subject to certain capacity limiting public health restrictions. For these two claim periods, and these two claim periods only, you may qualify for the subsidy if you meet the following two conditions instead. So if you were subject to a qualifying health restriction or a partial capacity limiting health restriction, and you have a claim period revenue drop of at least 25%, so not 40, but 25%, you could also be eligible for the subsidy. So for these two periods, these 2 months or 8 weeks, really, it's not 2 months, but 8 weeks, your requirements are less. And this is when Omicron hit. We had some insane lockdowns. Again, businesses were closed. People weren't doing anything. But these 8 weeks or these two periods, if you were subject to a qualifying health restriction or capacity limiting health restriction, and you only have a 25% decline, you would also be eligible for the subsidy for these two periods only. And you go back to the regular rules after. I know it's a bit confusing, a bit of a curveball, but just an FYI.
So Andrew,
Yes.
just so if you were a gym, for example, you would be able to qualify under those two periods outside of the like the tourism.
Sorry, I was drinking water. So if you're a gym under the recreational sort of section, where you were, so if you were not required for any type of capacity limit or restriction, then you would have to meet the 40% decline. But the government's like, we only want you to have, and a lot of businesses were in this part here. If you can only have 50% capacity, or you can only do this. You can't be 24/7. You can only be open from these hours to these hours. Any type of restriction, and you probably know as a business owner, if you're like, you're probably aware that you were restricted in one way, shape, or form, you would essentially check that off. And by checking it off, you move on to the next one, which is a 25% revenue decline instead of a 40% decline.
Andrew?
Yeah.
I just have a little question. There's been no problem with us in our application on both of those. They've both been accepted. But they say qualifying public health restriction or capacity limiting. I can't remember, like in our case, it was both. So when they check one, like you check one, like you can't really check two. When you check one, that's enough, apparently, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So it's either or. Yeah, you got it done. So either or, essentially, if you were completely like shut down, like you cannot be open because of your business, whatever.
Exactly. The first time I checked both and it just went to one, defaulted to one, the same.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So either or, essentially you meet this one condition and then you go, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. Good question. Yeah. Okay. So that's for the tourism. Okay. So if you're anywhere in that tourism sort of sector industry, you would follow those. Now, so this one's the hardest hit business recovery program, the Hhbrp. So this was also enacted exact same time as the tourism one. Okay, so ends on October 23rd, open from October 24th to May 7th. It's the same rules, 180 days. So it's the exact same thing. Okay. So businesses that do not qualify for the THRP, you can be eligible for this one if you meet these conditions. So when they say do not qualify for the THRP, that could be for a lot of things. One, you're not in the tourism industry, or two, essentially that's exactly what it is. If you're not in the tourism industry, you move on to this one. This one has harsher restrictions. Okay, so it's essentially, I know I'm sort of repeating myself here, but it's at least, this one's a 50% decline. So not a 40%, but a 50% decline. So let's say you are a professional service business. Well, you don't qualify for the tourism one. You got to go to this one. So some examples could be, let's say that you're a hair salon or massage clinic. I don't know. I'm trying to think of examples in specific periods of time in the last few months where your business would get completely crippled, that you were outside the tourism. There's a lot, there's tons. I just can't think of one on the top of my head, but there's obviously many. You would, if you're not in the tourism industry, in those examples, you go to this one, 50% revenue decline is a requirement, okay? Works the exact same way as the one I explained. So you have a maximum of 75% subsidy available. You know, demonstrate a revenue loss of at least 50%, sliding scale. Same rules. So whatever I just said 5 minutes ago, the exact same thing. So that's the only difference. Like, there's really not much to talk about this one in detail. It essentially is, if you're not in tourism, you go to this one, but you need a 50% decline, not a 40% decline. So it's harsher restrictions. And yeah, but businesses who are not tourism can still get wage subsidies and rent subsidies if they had a 50% decline in revenue. So there's still some money out there, but 50% is a lot if you're not in those industries. So it's a harsh restriction. It's a harsh like cutoff, unfortunately. Okay, so this one's important. So the local lockdown period is available from period 22 to 28, or essentially from December 19th to May 7th. What's interesting about this one is that it's the exact same subsidy as the Hhbrp, so the tourism one, but you don't have to be in the tourism to get this one. So if you remember a few slides ago, it's a separate program, but if you remember a few slides ago, I said there's 2 periods in this subsidy, right? There's 2 periods in the subsidy. I'll go back so I can show you what I mean. There's 2 periods, 24 and 25, where all you needed to do to qualify was to get a restriction and a 25% revenue decline. If you notice there, you didn't need to be in the tourism industry. So you did not need to be in the tourism industry if you were subject to a qualifying health restriction or a capacity limiting health restriction and a decline of 25%. That's all you needed to hit. So this local lockdown is that's what it is. That local lockdown, that's exactly what it is. So it comes into effect and is active once your business is subject to a qualifying health restriction or capacity limiting health restriction, regardless of sector. So it doesn't matter if you're in the tourism sector or not, this LLP or local lockdown period comes in effect, okay? And again, it's still 180 days to claim after the period. So this one's unique because there's like sort of segmented conditions and requirements for different periods. So I'm going to go through those. So periods 24 and 25, as you just recall, as we just went through that, right? Like I just showed that slide like a minute ago. So again, 25% revenue decline, and you were subject to either or one of these 2. For these other periods, 22, 23, and 26, 27, 28, okay? So they remove the capacity limiting components, okay? And your revenue decline is at least 40%. So an example, a business went through a health restriction. They went through a health restriction. And in these periods specifically, 22, 23, 26, 27, 28, you need a revenue decline of 40%. But in the periods 24 and 25, again, this is regardless of sector. Essentially, is your business went through a health restriction and a 40% revenue decline for periods 22, 23, 26, 27, 28, you get eligible for the subsidy. If you had a capacity limiting restriction, because some businesses were like, you can still open, anything you can do, but you got to cut down your capacity by a bit. For periods 24 and 25, so December 19th to February 12th, you would qualify with a 25% revenue decline. Now, all this seems very complicated. You're like, I have no idea where to start. Which ones am I eligible for? Defining what a health restriction is, capacity limit restriction, calculating your revenues, figuring your wages, figuring your rent subsidies. I know it's not an easy process. Like the Ontario support grant, it's like, here's $20,000 or here's $10,000, right? It's like, when it's all said and done, it's like, that wasn't that bad, as opposed to like going through all these hoops and to try to get, a few $1,000 or more, depending on your business. I'll talk about that in a sec, but I understand your frustrations if you're thinking about it while you're like listening to me rant for the last 45 minutes about these freaking subsidies. But you essentially have to figure out, okay, which period am I in? Okay, I'm in period this. Okay, did I have a health restriction or not? If yes, you're sort of going through like a flow chart, right? Where like you have to figure out where you're at, which period you're in, where your business falls, what kind of revenue decline. And it's like a flow chart. Now, if you go through the spreadsheet or the CRA website, it will go help you through that process. You're not on your own. Like there's literally a questionnaire they'll ask you, okay, which period are you claiming? This period, okay. Are you in this industry or not? Did you have a health restriction or not? Like there's a list of questions. You just answer yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. You put some numbers in, and it'll spit out what you're eligible for. And this is directly through the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency website. So I would highly recommend to check that out if you're confused about what I've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. Just to finish off with the LLP, it's again, same rule, 75% maximum subsidy, blah, 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 blah. I'm sort of repeating myself, but they all follow the same format. Okay, so like, again, if you've done wage subsidies in the past, rent subsidies in the past, they all follow the same requirements. So some final notes. Like I said, it's quite complex. If you think it is complex, it's okay to say that, because it is. It's not easy. I would recommend on a political side, on a voice side, right? CFIB, local chamber, talk to Shauna, talk to Tara, anybody who can maybe speak on your behalf or have multiple voices to kind of group them up. Essentially, I'll try to give you a snapshot as best I can. Okay, so more than likely, this is where you would fall under the subsidy based on these sort of like general criteria. If you had a small revenue decline and you had a lot of additional hiring, right, rehiring and new hiring, you probably want to go through this program, the CRHP. You more than likely will be eligible for this one. Again, if you only have a very small decline, this one's good for you. If you had an average decline and you're under a lockdown of any shape or form, the local lockdown period, that's what you probably want to be going under. If you had a heavy revenue decline, but you were not under a lockdown and you're not in the tourism sector, Hhbrp. If you had a heavy revenue decline, you're not under a lockdown, but in tourism, THRP. So it's very general. At the end of the day, it's not going to be the answer to every specific unique business, but it's a good idea to understand. It's like, if you had a pretty heavy revenue decline and you were not under lockdown, you sort of like figure this out. Okay, tourism, yeah, you're going to be dialing in, focusing under the THRP. But it's like some businesses are not in tourism. They don't have a heavy revenue decline and they're actually expanding or growing or doing quite decently. The government's like, here's some subsidy to hire new staff, right? So some businesses of mine, the CHP has actually been really good. It's actually like a funny example. It's kind of weird. I don't know if it was meant to do this or not, but it did. I had a golf client who, well, they're closed in March to April, right? They don't have any staff. The summer hits and they rehire all their staff and they have like 20 employees. It's like across the board. Well, guess what? They got like a $25,000 subsidy kickback. So it's like, but again, that's timing. It's timing of the you still need a 10% revenue decline, right? So just because you're doing well is a very general term. It's like you still need a 10% revenue decline. Now they're only eligible for the 1 month because and that's because they're a very seasonal business, right? It's like you can get completely destroyed as a golf business if you get an awful weather month. So it's really different and really dependent on so many variables. But the CRHP is, I feel like it's understated, it's undervalued. But again, if you go through that questionnaire process, it will literally tell you what is the best opportunity or best grant subsidy available for you and your unique sort of like criteria. So I would definitely check out that CRA calculator sort of website thing. All right. We did it. We did it, team. Well done. You survived an hour of this fella talking about who knows what nowadays. So.
And you did it exactly on time.
Yeah, there you go.
It's all planned. It's all planned.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you for everyone who's joined us this evening. If, like Andrew mentioned, there's a lot of really great links that are available to kind of help you follow, I guess, the path of all of these different funding programs. I'll be sharing them out by email. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to follow up with me or with Tara or with Andrew, and we can help you from there. So,
Jerry, I see you have some questions already.
Oh.
Yep, you're on mute though. You have to take it off mute. It should be on the lower left-hand corner of your screen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Shauna, you think you can come to my business? I'd like to talk to you one-on-one.
yes, yeah, that's no problem.
The name is Julie Fashion. I'm in the courtyard.
Okay.
I would that like I'm open from Wednesday to Saturday from 10 to 3
Okay.
until the playhouse opens, and then I'll do longer hours.
Yeah. And
Yep.
Shauna and I had spoken about doing some road trips together so we can help support your businesses, and we'll set up some appointments.
Yeah.
Anyone who's interested in having an appointment, we're happy to come and visit you or phone you or whatever's most convenient. But we can make those arrangements to try and get some information across.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And if I could just say something, all the stuff that Andrew's talking about, I mean, I know nothing about this kind of thing generally, but 2 years ago, I realized that our business was going to have to research ways of surviving. And we started off with the SUS program. And, you know, once I kind of got that through my head, I actually phoned Andrew a couple of times, a couple of little questions. Once I got into that, he's right. Once you get into that, and I understood what the periods meant, and to make sure we have accurate revenue figures for each month and payroll figures for each month, then you just kind of basically gradually started to understand it. And when the SUS was over, for example, October last, I thought that was done for us. But then once I started to ask about the tourism and hospitality program, I realized by following the prompts that you actually could access these things by going through there. So in other words, once you kind of have the basics, even somebody like me can follow it. And over the past 2 years, we've gotten a lot of support from all of these programs, and with a little help from an accountant or somebody to kind of get you through that first stage. If I can do it, like almost anybody can, it is really worth it. You just have to get in that headspace.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it becomes routine. It becomes process. It becomes consistent. Essentially, if you're familiar with the wage subsidies and rent subsidies, the only variable is your criteria. That's it. But you're going to calculate your wages the same way, your rent the same way. Essentially, you figure out, am I eligible? If yes, you go through the process. You go through the process like you normally would with the wage subsidies, like the same calculations and same everything. So, yeah. Cool.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time tonight. And
Andrew,
the information was great. It's always nice to hear it simplified and kind of put in a context that's easier to follow. And as Shauna mentioned, I know she's recording this as well as has copies of your slide decks. I'm sure we're all anxious to see that as well. And any ways we can help, we're here, and it's
Awesome.
great to have these opportunities.
Good.
Yeah.
Great,
Thanks for,
Andrew.
yeah, you listen, you guys are quite welcome. Anytime, it's my duty, I think, to try to share knowledge when I can, to help our awesome businesses in the area. And anytime, like I said, I have an opportunity to do that, I'm always grateful that, my business hasn't been affected the same way your businesses have. So it's the least I can do on my end to spread the knowledge and understanding on how to do these as best you can. So just keep it up, guys. I know it's been tough last 2 years, but we're rooting for you, and just keep doing what you're doing, and crossing our fingers that shitstorm is going to end. So.
Yeah, well, Andrew, I think you've helped a lot of people out over the last couple of years. I think you've been an angel on their shoulder for many things.
Well, that's very kind. I just do what I can. Like, at the end of the day, it's overwhelming, obviously, to try to absorb this information and to truly understand it the way I had to. And for all of our clients, since I don't even know how many wage subsidies, rent subsidies we've done since the beginning. I haven't charged any of our clients since day one for this work, and it's the one thing I can do, at least for them, and it's providing goodwill. Just show them that we care for them, and this is what we can do. But yeah, listen, if you guys have any specific questions about your specific, unique business, and it's a bit confidential, you want to ask, shoot me an email. Shauna put it into the chat. I'm happy to touch base with you 5-10 minutes, and I'll see what I can do to help guide you in the right direction.
Excellent, thank you.
Good, fantastic.
I'll just do one other quick question for everyone, is if there's any other topics like COVID funding or tax credits, or even understanding your credit score, any information like that you feel like you would find of value and you'd like to have someone like Andrew come and present some information, then please let me know, and we can arrange to have another session like this, so that you get more knowledge from somebody who's local and on the ground. So with that being said, have a good evening, everyone, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank
Thank you. Nice seeing you.
Nice
Thanks,
to meet
everyone.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good night, guys. Take care.
Good night.